Let's crack open a beer and share some thoughts.
Welcome to this Opinion special where we're going to be talking about just a single subject. Martin, what is it that we're going to be discussing in this show?
Simply put, Steve, lager. A show we started talking about when we went to the Czech Republic in February 2020.
It's taken us almost 18 months to bring this show to fruition.
Exactly. But fortunately for everyone listening, it's not just you and I talking about just the one subject of lager. We are joined by some specialists in the area. However, I shall let them introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Mario. I am the head brewer for Braybrooke Beer Company, a lager brewery.
Hi everyone, I'm Reece from Donzoko Brewing Company, which is currently based in Edinburgh, and we make very vaguely German-inspired lagers that are usually very hoppy and unfiltered, kind of guessing our own style.
I'm Alex from Austin Grounded Brewers. We're a brewery based in Bristol. So my partner and I, Annie Clements, we co-founded the brewery together. The last part of the name was us kind of traveling around the world and living different places. So I think we lived in Tasmania, Brisbane, Melbourne, Perth, Brussels, Perth, Melbourne, London, and then Bristol. So that was the last bit. And the ground a bit, someone that sensible knows it's important. So for us was to finally stop and make a brewery and make a business of our own.
Great, and I'm Rich from Utopian Brewing. So I co-founded this in 2019. So we've had 2 birthdays of been producing beer into trade now. One was on March the 26th, 2020, and the second one was in 2021. So we've had 2 birthdays in lockdown. We brew 100% lager, and we only brew with British grown ingredients. So we did that primarily from a sustainability perspective. That's where we kind of started out with it, but now it's become a bit of fun in trying to create as many styles that are influenced by international styles, but again, like Reece, trying to do it in our own way, and to use some of these kind of experimental hops and stuff and some traditional techniques to do that. So a lot of fun. Great to be here.
And it's great to have you all join us tonight in what's essentially going to be, we're going to try a bit of a round table discussion about lager, and particularly lager in the UK and where it's at right now. So the first question that we're going to throw out there to you all is, why lager? Why did you all choose lager as a specialism, so to speak?
Well, I think because I sort of had most of my career making hoppy pale ales. Actually, most of my brewing career was doing that, and at Little Creatures in Australia. And I think after doing that for many years, towards the end of my time there, we used to just make a lager that we mainly made. The approach was just making a lager that was just for our cellar door there, just for people that didn't want to drink pale ale, basically. But we just, as a brewing team, we always just found it really, really difficult to make really nice lager. And it just used to drive us nuts to the point where we were getting obsessed with it until we figured out actually our job was mainly making pale ale. So we kind of settled down. But when we came over to the UK, we mainly came to make lager for Camden Town. But then as we decided to do our own business, we were thinking about what we would make, and we kind of went through all different things. But actually what we decided to do is how can we make a brewery just making beer out of the most simple ingredients. So how do we make really tasty beer out of just really simple ingredients, which is Pilsner malt and some old-fashioned hops, was basically the foundation of what we did. And now the challenge is selling it, of course, eh? So, you get better at these things as you go on.
I mean, we came at it in a kind of similar, I think, but my co-founder was in the pub business. That's where my background was, really more than brewing. And the one thing that's clear to us anyway is that there just weren't, and I kind of guess you can see that from the number of people that you can kind of name that are specialist or focused lager brewers. There just weren't many people doing it, and there was an awful lot of people brewing IPAs. And so it seemed like if you're going to create a brewery, it's quite a good idea to start with somewhere where there's not too many people to compete with. But also the fact that the bigger point, I think, was that there weren't many people focused on it. So if you were a lager drinker who liked to drink lager, it was really hard for you to get a good independently brewed lager. But it was ridiculous when you got kind of 70% or something of the UK drinking population drinking lager, that a lot of those people just didn't want a better beer. So we kind of thought, if you focus on lager, then there should be a good bunch of people looking to drink a better product than what they can get from the macros, and that's really what we're trying to do.
Yeah, for us, really, it was a matter of just making one particular style of beer that we all loved, that wasn't really readily available fresh here in the UK, which is Keller beer, or Franconian style Keller beer, so unfiltered and pasteurized, sort of rich, malty, but very drinkable lager. And it all started a few years back because just three owners have a connection with a brewery in Bamberg, Franconia, called Marsbräu, very old brewery, been there since 1670. And Nick, who's one of the owners of the brewery, who has a distribution business in London, was the English distributor for Marsbräu. So they kind of got in touch and he said, we would like to, start a lager brewery. And had a few beers, had a lot of chats, and then it all started with a Keller beer. And from there we expanded, and now we make all sorts of different styles. But the main focus and the beer that we make the most at the brewery, I say about 60% of our output is Keller.
I'm a big fan of volume drinking as a thing, like not in terms of like a amount of alcohol produced, but like drunk, but in terms of like whether it's like bitter in certain parts of the north of England, whether it's stout over in Ireland, or if it's like Helles or Pilsner in different parts of Germany, that kind of beer that's the go-to for everyone, and everyone drinks like maybe one or two most evenings and has a really nice time, and that kind of convivial nature, like of people sharing that beer. That's what I experienced when I lived over in Munich. Everyone drank quite a lot of beer, and it was a really nice, wholesome atmosphere. And that's what I kind of wanted to kind of encapsulate and kind of bring over and spread around a bit, like really accessible but really tasty beer. And lager, like for me, is like the thing that does that for everyone. It's really accessible, whether it's going to like you and your friends or your dad and your granddad. Everyone can enjoy a really nice pint of lager. And when that is on farm, or when that tastes amazing and it's used as really good ingredients, it can be like the best thing also in the world. But it's also really accessible to everyone. And that for me is like the route I want to go down, that kind of happy middle ground, that go-to really delicious beer. That's what I wanted to make.
I think that's all slightly different answers, but coming to the similar sort of place from all four of you. But as all four of you were speaking, the thing which struck me was it just, and maybe it's the work I do working in the bank, but don't I feel like a risk what you were doing, considering the competition you're up against in terms of lager, both off trade and on trade? I mean, that must have played on your minds at some point. Didn't you ever think, why have we done this?
Yeah, I think so. But then actually, I think on the flip side, if you say we were, if we're focused on something else, so whether that be pale ale or whatever, like there's also a heap of competition in that. So I think the hardest thing is actually sticking to your guns and actually sticking with it and trying to push through the noise. I think is the hardest thing, because no matter where you in a country with 2,500 breweries, no matter what you're producing, like there's a lot of competition. So there's heaps out there. And I mean, even if you look at lager in Germany, there's lots of breweries all varying size. But if you look at some of those online, like there was an online beer shop used to get from time to time some beer from Bavaria, but like you look at, they have like maybe 100 different breweries on there, and every single beer is the same price. So you kind of think, so when time reaches infinity, all the beers the same price. The only difference is the brand in there, And so it definitely is like I think it is risky. At the same time, it's kind of satisfying. I don't know. I kind of dig it. I dig kind of doing something a bit different.
I think starting any business, Martin, is tough, right? And food and drink, any sector. If you want to make cheese or some form of Scotch eggs or whatever it might be, there's always going to be somebody out there in macro supermarket world who's doing it on a big scale. But if you believe in yourself and you believe you can make a great product, so I think Reece's point was great. It was all about just making great beer that people want to drink. If you can do that, you just got to believe that you're going to be able to get people to buy it, right? And I think that's kind of it is risky for sure, but I think you're kind of all the people, just from this first conversation, because you kind of have faith in yourselves that you think you can kind of get there and you believe. And so look at the other way around, you go, well, actually, I'm going to start a brewery anyway. We believe we can make some great beer. Then this lager thing, right? There's millions of people drinking that. There's loads of people. So it's actually a massive market to go and get after it, rather than going for a really tiny piece of it. So you're kind of shooting fish in a barrel, really. You're trying to find lager drinkers who just want a better one.
I think we definitely all shown that lager is definitely not just one thing. So obviously, a lot of the general public, at first will think that, would immediately associate lager with just sort of a fizzy yellow thing, which it is a lot of the time. But there's lots of different fizzy yellow things, as say Northern Hellas or Keller Pills from Lost and Grounded, or the 10 Degrees from Utopian. They're all fizzy yellow things, but they're all completely different. And despite the fact that they can be very recognizable and approachable by just someone who's never had such a beer before and who's just used to drinking, whatever lager they prefer. They are all distinctly different. They all come from a different place, and they're all different styles. So obviously, we've all got that. We've all got the ability to make different styles for stuff that still looks like a lager, if you know what I mean. So there's a great variety that sometimes is not necessarily talked about or even thought about when talking about lager. No one in the right mind would think of talking about ale just generally. I mean, there's so many different things, and it should be the same for lager. I think we're getting there. People are recognizing that there's a lot of different styles, really. But yeah, so that's why we can all do our own thing, I guess.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, I think I might have been on one of your polls actually, which is you have to pick Pilsner or Helles. Which one is it? And it's like kind of no, there are so many more styles than just those two things. And so sometimes the commentators on don't help in terms of only seeing lager in that way. And it was a great quote from. I really like it anyway. So Mark Dredge quote on one of our social media posts when we had a beer out there. And it's kind of, I think he said, if you think lagers are just bland and fizzy, you've just been drinking the wrong lagers. And I think, as Mario says, we've got lagers in this group of people that are black, very pale, straw coloured. You've got beers from 3.5 to 7, 7.5, 8%. You've got beers that are cloudy and crisp and bright, and a huge variety within that segment. So there is an education piece perhaps that just needs to go on. And this helps, right? It's getting more people to give it a go and try something in the lager family and in the lager styles that suits them.
Yeah, and also I think it is kind of like nice that the lager is almost like the cheapest thing on the bar because it is the most accessible, and like it's like as much as I'd want to make like a beer that is like incredibly complex and flavorsome, I want people to be able to like buy it as well. Like people like who are not necessarily that into beer and think, wow, this is so much better than the other stuff I was drinking. And if we were to price at too high a premium for what it is actually worth, it would kind of not spread the word as well about our beers and how good they are to just like regular people who drink a lager who are not like beer podcast listeners.
I think one thing is with lager, which is I think going back onto the competition thing is, I think and all of us here are the same. Like we all have breweries of varying sizes, but we're all in the scheme of things we're not very big, And I think the hard thing with lager is you're still, generally speaking, I mean, we'll be selling at a premium to, say, mainstream beer, but we're probably under a lot more price pressure than our kind of other craft peers, because it's lagers where the volume is in the pub. So I don't know what the ratio is. It's probably about 80% of sales is probably lager or something like that in the pub. So if you're going to go into start talking about those lines, it's like that really impacts on the profitability of a venue. So you end up in a situation where you need to have the right brand so people can sell it at a slight premium, but it still has to be within a certain range. This is me kind of like an economics hat on, because actually a lot of people still will think like, no, we need to be able to sell that for £5 a pint or $5.50 or whatever the number is. Just pick the number. And whereas I think for a lot of small brewers, it's hard to do that. It's hard to produce a keg of beer and be able to do that. I think is quite difficult, because it's like death by a thousand cuts, because you have, it's like, what's your price of malt, and what's your overheads, and what's your this, and what's your that, and you have automation or not, and all these sort of things that sort of feed into that end price, and whether or not you can make it kind of work in competition. Because we're sort of like, to an extent, we're all kind of price takers nowadays. Even if you look at the craft industry back, say, like even 5 years ago, there was a lot more price setting, but now there's a lot more price taking. So like a keg of pale ale used to be sold it for almost any price, but it's not like that anymore. And it's definitely not like that for lager. That's for sure. So, which maybe some of the other guys can sort of agree with. But it's
Reece, just thinking about what you said as part of your intro about how you're loosely based your styles and your recipes, perhaps on a bit of German influence. Could you go into that a bit more? So what does inspire you to make the various different lager recipes that you do come up with?
Well, it kind of happened a bit by accident when I first started making beer. I wanted to produce like unfiltered, like Helles, pretty much like a Helles from like the smaller kind of brew pubs around Munich and Bavaria that were making like relatively kind of hoppy, slightly hazy Helles. That was like, for me, it was like the best parts of like a pale ale and a lager combined. It was just like ultimate session beer, and I was like, this is what I want to make. And then I kind of thought about how much it was like, if I was to make just a classic like Helles or Pilsner beer and compare it to like Augustiner Helles, it wouldn't be as good, would be more expensive. And I'm like, well, why would people buy my beer when they can just buy like the real thing? Like, I know it's gonna be better. So I started playing around with things to make the beer kind of more, kind of a bit different, a bit kind of my style. And I ended up with having a beer that was like, all my beers are kind of relatively hoppy in the kettle in the whirlpool, and have quite a noticeable like acid character, quite a strong like tang to most of the beers, and that is kind of what I went down and started exploring like that sort of flavor profile, and that's kind of where I've ended up, where most of my beers are kind of bright and acidic and generously hopped as well. And that's everything from like the session pale garden beer all the way up to like select pills, which is like a over 5% single hop pilsner. Everything's pretty hoppy, pretty bright and acidic, and all unfiltered. And I don't really strive for clarity. I just kind of have the flavor in my head I want to go for.
But I kind of like making. I mean, we make everything unfiltered, and actually, in my career up until now, like every brewery I worked in, we always filtered beer. So, and I mean, Little Creatures was re-inoculated with lager yeast for the secondary conditioning, but in Camden we filtered most of everything. And when we did the brewery here, we thought actually we'll do it unfiltered. And I think one benefit was you don't have to buy a filter, so there you go, you save yourself, or whatever the number is. But actually, in fact, the actually real kind of reason is, and you could say, oh, there's more character in the beer, et cetera, which there can be for sure. But I think it kind of just gives another element of personality to the beer, because, like Reece was saying, like if you're gonna, it's like the world has enough cover bands, and you need to sing some originals, and it's like, if we're going to try and compete, like like Reece said, like why would you try and make Augustiner when someone could buy Augustiner for cheaper and it might be better, and so I think it does, like for us with doing the beer unfiltered, it's like another dimension of personality, because sometimes it'll be very, very bright, other times it'll be like a little bit more hazy, you know, and it does kind of vary, you know, even though most of the beer, you know, hitting the canning line or kegging line or bottling is all kind of looks about the same, you know, when it goes in, but it just all behaves differently. And then I think as we're making, generally, like we try to make our lager as pale as possible, and I think what we see as well is you just see just little nuances come through, because we use a blend of Pilsner malts, and as the malt seasons start to change, you just start to see all the different nuances come through. And it's just kind of like, yeah, the beer just has a little bit of personality, because otherwise it's, yeah, if it didn't have personality, then actually someone, like Reece said, can buy something else for a lot cheaper. You know, like there has to be some reason for someone to want to buy it.
And if it's always the same, you never get that magic of when you get the perfect pint. Like when you go to a pub and like they have it on top-notch form, you're like, oh my God. Like where if it's always like 6, 7 out of 10, you're like, oh yeah, that's standard. But when you get that pint that is 10 out of 10, it's worth it.
We kind of came at it, I guess, from a slightly different angle. With that, we had this thing that there was a lot of people that were drinking trad lager, you know, macro lager, that wanted an independent alternative. But the fact they're still drinking trad lager means they're not really in craft world, if that makes sense. They're kind of still drinking the macros, because the step from San Miguel to 8% Nupas is probably too big a jump. So trying to get to those people. So that's why we started off with our premium British lager. So, and it was filtered, bright, 4.7, you know, looked like a macro lager in lots of ways. But was, you know, we were just trying to make it better, but accessible. So try to do it, you know, the British ingredients helps you in terms of the cost point for that. And going playing back to Alex's point, you know, we knew we were going to need to be fairly competitive to get into places. And then the kind of, over time, we always sort of thought then we'd have other styles that we'd introduce to keep the brand fresh, to keep the interest in the beers. And I guess in the unfiltered version of that beer first up came by accident. You know, we sold the filtered version to a kind of more crafty place, Topshire Brewery in Exeter, and they said, "Could you do this unfiltered?" And we went, "Yeah, of course, I guess we could." And we just kind of filled a few kegs from the tank, and the unfiltered was born. And you know, we sell a lot of that beer in that format now. But that premium British filtered lager, you know, we sell it into a lot of the local pubs. We've got a lot of local market for that. We've got some further afield market for that now, and it's still our biggest selling product by a margin. So, which is quite interesting. And then in some ways, the one good thing that's come for us out of lockdown was the need to, you know, really move into the small pack form, accelerated the pace of introducing those new styles. So, and all those beers that we've kind of brought out over the last year, I guess.
Yeah, and none of them taste like that fizzy yellow thing that Mario's commented on that you can get in most pubs that, you know, 70% of the population drink. Everything that you folks produce is flavorful, it's different, and it falls into so many different style categories as well, that I think it certainly opened my eyes to the world of lager and the realms of possibility within it.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing. So if you're talking about a main influence, which would be Franconia, really. So the northern bit of Bavaria, the one of the spiritual homes of beer, of lager, definitely in the world. One of the places in the world with the highest concentration of breweries per capita, and I've been there, luckily, quite a few times. By quite a few times, I mean quite a lot, really. I've probably been about 20 times. And you can go in every different season, and you can see that you can definitely see the difference. So not just in the styles of beers that are made, but in the way beers enjoyed and in the way things are done. So in the summer, obviously they'll have the Kellers out, so the lighter beers will be served like straight in the stone mugs, and then by the end of Keller season, so September, October, everyone will start going back in. It's what they call in Franconia the fifth season starts, so where all the guest houses reopen, and the Bock beers start coming out. That's another interesting time to go. And then for Lent, they've got the Doppelbox. And, it's sort of basically the different times of the years are sort of accompanied by different beers. And we are slowly trying to do a bit of that as well. So we'll always have some of our specials, which will always come out at the same time of the year. We do a harvest party on site at the brewery, which is on a working farm. So at the end of harvest, basically, so every September we do a little party. Apart from last year, of course. So we brew a fest beer for that. So sort of like our version of an Oktoberfest Märzen sort of thing. So slightly stronger beer that's meant to get you a bit drunk. And we'll always do a Maibock for May, so strong pale bock, which we've released in May, I think beginning of May. And we'll always do a smoked beer in the autumn. So we like to keep doing that just because it kind of keeps us in touch with our main inspiration, which is that those Franconian traditions, really.
Within lager, there's a huge amount of seasonality, especially if you're looking at it from a traditional point of view. How important to each of you is seasonality in your brewing?
So I think probably the main beer for us would be every year, like we do a running with Spectre's Baltic Porter, which is a black lager basically. And that's happened now for 16, 17, 18, 19, 5 years actually. I think 5 times we've done that. And maybe 4 times. I don't know. 4 times I think we've done it. And so that's really kind of interesting. But I think we don't focus so much on it. Although in saying that, I mean, we do. It always tends to be a bit of a fest beer that comes out at some point in time. We don't tend to call it like an Oktoberfest, but we'll just call it a fest beer. And I mean, we did that once with Donzoko and Braybrooke. We did the Mega Lager collab a few years ago, and then I think the interesting thing is when you start doing the other styles, like whether it be a Vienna style lager or a fest beer or a Märzen or whatever, you start to actually learn a lot more about making lager because like the styles depending on the malt backbone, and so the grist and everything. You start learning how like hops interact a lot more with the sort of malt and all this, because some of those styles don't like very much bitterness. So sometimes, and it's kind of hard getting it right without, not having them too sweet and then not having them too bitter. It's almost like a fine line. And I think that's the most interesting thing for me, making all the different styles of lager, is actually it kind of makes you learn a lot as a brewer, which I can sort of enjoy, But I mean, right now we're making like probably 70% Keller Pills and 30% Helles. So that's 100%. So we're basically making nothing else at the moment besides those. Well, that's not quite true. We got a couple other tanks with other things, but we're kind of a brewery that's running down to about 4 products now. We're just.
But probably increasingly, at least for the first 2 years, it was just let's make as much Helles as we can and flog that. And that was a fun time. And then since branching out into other styles of beer, definitely trying to bring more kind of seasonality in. Like we have a fest beer that is we kind of launched last year, which is going to come back every year. In our non-lager beers, there's especially a bit more seasonality. Like when we do some mixed ferm things, like it's all UK fruit, and that is when it corresponds to each harvest time of that certain fruit. But in terms of lager, so we're definitely going to get into, like we launched garden beer last year, the start of lockdown, which is a beer that's designed to it's a session lager within the shops that is designed to drink in your garden. So just because we've been moving breweries, we've not brewed that yet, but that's usually like end of spring to the start of autumn. That's kind of the period for that beer, and then moving it like fest beer. And the kind of we brewed a Doppelbock for Lent the last 2 years. We didn't do it this year just because of tank space, but I think it is important to kind of to brew those different beers for different times of year. But equally, sometimes I do enjoy like a really like dark doppelbock on a nice warm summer's night. So it kind of depends on kind of what you want to make as well, I guess. But yeah, something we'll hope to do increasingly a bit more, rather than just making Northern Hellas all the time.
I think lagers are great to showcase malt as well. Right? It's almost like the great balance against the super hoppy beers. You know, people would probably know now that we use a lot of decoction mashing in our beers now, and that's usually a lot of the same kind of end result as in place of specialty malts, but you get that kind of dark colour, you get all those wonderful kind of caramel toasty kind of flavours coming through, which people probably again don't naturally associate with lager as having fuller flavour without needing to get that all from hops, which I think is great as well. Our Chernay, the black lager, is similar kind of beer. Really, it kind of does the same thing, I think, in terms of pulling those things through.
Well, I was going to say about the Chernay was just an amazing beer, but it was going to lead me on to asking about to make that kind of beer versus maybe say your very popular British lager. Does that make sourcing the ingredients any tougher for you, Rich?
No, not really. Really, decoction mashing, I don't want to overstress it really, but you don't need a huge amount of specialty malt in some of those beers. A large part of that Chernay lager is still our standard base malt. It's kind of use lots of Munich and Vienna malts that are all malted in the UK. They're pretty easy to get hold of. And in all those beers too, we're using pretty traditional English hops. So the Chernay is Fuggles. It's 100% Fuggles, which a lot of people wouldn't necessarily associate as a hop that we use in lager. But I think Alex point is great. You always try to get this balance with get a really nice balanced beer. So you're just looking for the right amount of bitterness, and you don't want something that's going to overpower it in terms of flavours.
I think with roasty beers, especially lager, is actually really good for that. It seems to be a good combination because you sort of really clean base, and then it can be a good way to like showcase the malt. So in that beer we use a lot of like debittered roast malt, as well as I'm just trying to think in my mind, as well as a heap of special B and dark crystal malt and different things. So there's a lot of specialty malt in it, but the whole thing comes across just like it's really kind of clean and neat. Even though you have all that sort of big malt character in there, it's actually really kind of smooth and balanced.
Yeah, it's definitely true. Yeah, and although the basic process is the same, right? With the lager, whether they are an IPA, it's a mash in a kettle. By the time we get to the end of the kettle, a lot of that process is similar. A lot of the ingredients that have gone in probably could be quite similar, and most of the change and the difference happens when you're in fermentation with the yeast. But there's a lot of other nuances that go on in that early stages of lager to effectively to prepare that work for that later fermentation phase. And I think it's interesting at the beginning, in your early, lots of trial and error, trying to create a great lager in previous roles, and you realise that you kind of need to focus on it and really kind of tune and hone those techniques around brewing lager.
I feel like brewing is actually like it's almost like 20% ingredient, 80% technique, So it's kind of like if you had a bunch of chefs in a room and you said, "There's your steak, and there's your salt, and there's your pepper, and there's the frying pan," like they'd probably all come out slightly differently, And so it's all about technique. Everyone's starting with the same stuff.
Sticking with this sort of question about the ingredients, it sort of made me think. One of the things I've often heard about lager is that you can't hide. So if something goes wrong, we've heard people have still worked with other beers when things haven't gone quite to plan. But what I've heard is that you can't hide something bad in a lager. Would you guys agree with that? And does it make your life more tougher?
Yeah, I think the hardest I think that, yeah, because exactly that. I think the hardest issue is in smaller breweries that aren't focusing on it. It's like when you're kind of making it start stop, it's very hard to get it consistent. And most of the quality issues, like if you have decent boiling and all the rest of it, most of the quality issues is all about the yeast management and how happy you can keep the yeast. And the yeast kind of likes to work, and it likes to like be in a bit of a routine. And we find it all the time when we go into like the slow period, say around January, when suddenly all the brewing slows down. It takes a lot of work to like just keep the beer tasting consistent because the yeast struggles. So we'll often get kind of contacted by brewers when they talk about lager and stuff. But it's probably that would be the key thing I would say to everyone is actually you got to just be doing it all the time, whether that's 1 batch a week or 10 batches a week or 100 batches a week or whatever. But you just need to be doing it pretty consistently.
Yeah, and that also helps with just honing it down, really. I mean, it's just that I found in my personal journey that the learning curve making lager has been quite steep, just because it's just a different approach in so many ways. There's a different approach to using the different ingredients, to mashing, to fermentation. Definitely fermentation, I'd say it's definitely at least 50% of it, if not more. But yeah, it's just about learning how to get it right, really, and adjusting your mindset to doing that specific thing, which is not necessarily the same thing as, you know, making a great IPA or making a great bitter or whatever. It's just it's different. So yeah, it definitely helps for us. I would say for all of us that we do it all the time. That's definitely a great advantage. I agree with Alex on that.
Where we are now in terms of beer, what do you think the current public perception of lager is in the UK? And Alex, I'm going to come to you first on this one.
General public love it. They love it. That's what everyone drinks, you know. And I think the reason why is like because there isn't those bold flavors, and actually what it is people most of the time just want to drink something, have fun with their friends, you know. And we kind of often say this, like as much as we like to kind of focus on, you know, on our Belgian styles or, you know, or Keller pills or da. It's like actually most people just want to pick up the beer and drink it and not really think about it too much. And I think that's the general population. I think in the craft beer circles, which is a much smaller proportion of the drinking population, I think there's probably an underappreciation of lager, but it's definitely starting to change. I'm definitely seeing that just in the last few years as well. There's definitely a lot of people that are starting to take more, you know, appreciate more decent lager, whereas, you know, it used to be in the days like, you know, if you think about the rating websites and stuff, it's like, I don't like lager, 1 star. It's like, well, why the hell did you buy it? But, you know, I would say if I was going to look at that, our lowest rated beer that we make is actually Keller Pills, but actually it's this beer we sell like by far the most of. So go figure. Our highest rated beer is a beer we could never sell. So it stuck around for ages. So.
I would like to just come in on the public perception thing, because obviously, especially when I go out with non-beery friends, and by that I mean people who aren't so immersed in the scene, whenever I order a lager, they're always surprised. So when I say I'm ordering a lager, like recently I was in Leeds and I went to North Bar and they've got a really nice Pilsner, and everyone's expecting me to have gone for an IPA or a pale ale, because they just assume I've discounted all forms of lager, because as far as they're aware, I probably wouldn't be the sort of person buying the aforementioned macro, yellow, fizzy, cold drink. So I think there's still work to be done on the lager front, where people still have lager there is only one type of lager.
And I don't think we'll ever change that, Martin. You know, I think we're tiny, really, in the overall hemisphere of beer drinkers in the UK. You know, we're kind of like this much. But that shouldn't stop you trying to, you know, just mess that market up a bit for the big guys and try and come out with things that are better and give people better choice. Yeah, and maybe as well tap in a bit to, hopefully which will maintain post lockdown that that people did care a bit, and hopefully do care a bit more about the provenance of what they're buying and where the ingredients come from and how that's made and the production techniques and supporting local. And if all those things persist a bit after lockdown, then more people will migrate from that macro world into beers that are similar enough, if you like, for them to take that first step. And then hopefully that's part of the journey that everyone here started on in terms of craft beer, a journey that people have gone on in that, and hopefully people could follow a similar journey in lager.
And sort of thinking about that then, so, about we're talking about perception and getting people to drink more of it. And I'll come to you first, Mario. Where do you see lager production going in the next few years, for example?
Well, it's good to see there's a lot more people making lager, definitely. So people have sort of caught on to the fact that, you can make a good quality product and sell it to, maybe also a more craft beer sort of audience of making lager. And the truth of the matter is, as Alex said before, I mean, lagers is essentially a numbers game at the end of the day. So we've all got to get to, a decent size, I suppose, and make enough beer to sustain ourselves. Because unfortunately, we're never going to get to the point where, a keg of pills sells for the same price as, a New England IPA. So hopefully we'll get to the point where we've got at least a few established breweries, like us here, I hope, that keep making a lot of really good lager. We've got to get to the point we can't just, we can't all be making different beers all the time and stay tiny. We've got to establish ourselves and just keep going. Really, that's the main thing. You just got to keep going.
I said like people often say like lager is like a step in the journey of drinking beer, but like my favorite, like working in a pub in Newcastle, the Free Trade, which I did for the first year and a half of running the brewery. Like my favorite customers were just old gadgets who'd just come in the pub on a Sunday and be like, what lager you got on? And I've got this one. It's like a local brewery. And they'd be like, I'll have one of them. And then like 4 hours later, they're still drinking that beer. Like, and then they'll come in the next week and they'll order by name. They're like, they're also my favorite customers because they have no idea about craft beer. They just really like that beer. And like, I don't think it necessarily needs to be like a step in people's tasting journey. Sometimes if you like lager, this one's a bit better. It's clearly worth the money if they keep buying it. And that's really where the volume is in drinking in beer in the UK. Is those like people who are not really bothered about lager, but when they have a slightly better one, you can taste the difference. Like I'm not really a big coffee guy, but you go to a nice coffee place, you get really good coffee. You're like, wow, not like that Greg's beating a cup machine. It's not the best. And like, if your beer's good enough, it demonstrates it, and then those people will drink the volume of that product. And I think that's the key, is just to getting those people to drink the beer, and then they'll keep drinking it because it's really good.
Reece, do you think that sometimes lager, particularly within the craft bubble, or particularly with drinkers that look for craft beer, suffers from that constant pursuit of the new and something different, beer after beer? Whereas, like you say, some people will be very happy to go into a pub and find a beer that they really enjoy and sink pint after pint of it. But there's a minority of people within the craft drinking world that are constantly looking for something new as their next beer, something they've never had.
I think the people who are in search of new are never going to be the volume customers that are going to drive any sales. It's just going to be like a bit of exposure, cool. But really, the people who are drinking the volume are the ones who do not care. Mm-hmm. They just like it because it tastes nice. And that is great, like unreal, because there's no preconceptions. There's no like, they're not trying to compare it to other things. They just like it because it's good. And that's what I like is people who will drink the beer on its merits and not just because it's something new, which is a perfectly valid reason to drink a beer. But at the end of the day, the people who are going to drive your brand and drink all the beer you're going to make They're just cool, regular people.
We all make beers that are made to be drunk, really, which is an advantage in a way, which is why we can be the volume line in a pub. And most of the time when you're talking to craft beer people, I suppose, like we do most of the time, it's sort of easy to forget that 75-80% of all the beer drunk in this country is lager of varying quality. And if we can get a portion of that to be lager of better quality, then that's great.
The four of us, I guess, haven't really spoken much before, together before this. And I found it really, kind of fascinating and encouraging, really, that we all see this in a very similar way, that we're in the lager world, and it is all about, there is a lot of it about volume, and it's all about getting the drinkers, as I thought, Reece's point there was great. It's just the drinkers that come into a pub and just want a better beer, right? Just want to drink it. They're going to drink the same beer all the time. And that doesn't make that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. So I think in that what happens in the future, there's a lot just sort of out of our hands, really, in terms of what happens in the pub market, what happens in legislation, and what happens in Siegel were talking about at the AGM about trying to get another kind of competition authority review of big beer, and trying to make some of the market space a bit more accessible. Hopefully there's some things that will happen in that side that will make some of that on-trade market more accessible to people of our size, so that we could introduce those beers to more of those people that Reece's favourite customers in his bar.
And as we've just moved out of what has undoubtedly been the probably toughest 18 months that any of us have ever lived through in terms of both our personal and our business lives, firstly, it's great to see that all four of you are still here and you're still going strong and you're producing fantastic beers as well, and that you've, to a certain extent, ridden the wave. Nobody knows what's to come in the future, but hopefully you'll still be there producing great lagers for everybody moving forward. What's next for each of you? What are your plans from this point onwards?
We're running completely flat out now, so we're sort of running full 2 shifts, kind of. I think right now averaging about 14 brews a week, and just flat out. Mainly like almost the entire cellar is full of Keller Pils and Helles, so there's a lot of demand out there. So we're just doing that. It's the hardest bit's becoming about hiring people quick enough, because there's appears to be not that many people out there at the moment. Like there's a lot of people. I think we were speaking about hospitality earlier. Like it's very, very much a shortage out there. But I think that the best thing about, if we're going to take a positive out of the last year, I think for us it was actually made us stop and refocus on what we do, which was the original ambitions of the brewery, which is we make Keller Pils, we make all these other delicious things, and we stuck to our guns, kept on making all that stuff, because people, when we first opened, they were like, "Oh, you're crazy!" We have a pale ale we make now, but we never had a pale ale. And we're just like, we pretty much picked every single style of beer that was going to be really, really hard to sell on a small scale. I decided to do that as our mission. And now we just stuck to our guns, and actually people are sort of finally getting it, and it just feels really good to see that where we're getting to now. So we just kind of, I guess we are just going with it and see what happens. We're not trying to take over the world or anything, but I think our original aim was to make a really nice regional business, and we're sort of getting there now, which is feels good. We just got to keep focused and not lose the plot. That's the hardest thing. Don't lose the plot.
We're also running at capacity right now. A bit over capacity, some would say. We're flat out, and the next step is to expand a little bit by early next year. We're gonna open a little tap room on site, which has been an ambition for a long while. It's just that obviously There's been many different reasons why we haven't done it yet, but it will happen hopefully in the next couple of months. And then again, just keep going. It's the same for us. We've got just Keller Lager in all the tanks right now. Just Keller Lager and Helles, and just keep making a lot of that, which was again the original intent of the brewery, was just to make Keller Lager. We just added other things, just because that's just what you do. But the original beer that started this brewery was Keller. So we're glad that we can make a lot of it and just keep getting it better and better. So that's our plan. Just keep making a lot of that for the foreseeable future.
At Donzoko, we've just moved from Hartlepool in northeast England to Edinburgh in Scotland. So that move's still ongoing. We put in another 100 hectares of fermentation space and got a new warehouse, and it has been flat out. And we've started brewing last week, just filling everything full of Helles, Northern Helles, and Big Foam, trying to get those permanent lines, the people who rely on the beer, like nice and wet for things beginning to open back up again. It's been a lot of work. It's still like a one-person thing, so it's still a lot of work, but it's fun. We've got a new space for mixed fermentation beers and barrel-aged beers, and we've got a bit of scope to expand as well. It's going to be great. Maybe looking at some pubs as well, some little bars in city centres, serving our beer nice and fresh, and just kind of brewing more Helles and finally being able to say, yes, we can sell you some Helles instead of no, sorry, I'll ghost like these 3 pubs, which is annoying.
There's a common theme here, which is always good, I think. We're the same, right? We're flat out. I think the resourcing point is a big issue. I think we're struggling to get people in. So that's a longer term issue, I think, perhaps for the industry. But same, which is great. We set out to brew. I think the mission said a range of accessible, easy to drink quality lagers, and that's just what we want to keep doing. We will keep throwing the odd specials in there, so we can have those Zoom launches keep going on, boys. So we'll still keep doing the odd one of those. That's a bit of fun. I think more of the same, really.
I was just going to say, I always loved like Truma Brewery in Austria, and like at one point, and it's still there actually. They have like a related brewery, and there's a Truma Brewery in Berkeley. And I remember going there like I don't know, it might have been 15 years ago or something. And it's like the perfect brewery for me. Like the brewery, they make 2 SKUs. They make Truma Pils bottles, Truma Pils draft. That's all they make. It's like, I'll tell you what, it is fucking brilliant for planning and purchasing. It's like the perfect scenario. Like, it's so efficient.
So I've been to a couple of places up in Franconia where it's the same, where they've got a Keller or lager or whatever, and then you go in the bar and they've got Keller, and then they've got Pils, and then you go and speak to the brewer and they tell you that the Pils is just a Keller but filtered.
And you can get away with so much with lager then, can't you? Just with those different names.
It happens all the time. Great.
You've just shared all the secrets there, Mario. That's it. The cat is out of the bag.
I'm glad you didn't open with that.
Yeah, exactly. Just look at a different color label can work wonders.
Well, listen, folks. It's been great chatting to you, and it's really fantastic to hear that you are all doing so well, and that you've got all of your tanks are full of lovely, delicious lager ready to serve the UK public in what's surely going to be. I think we hear this every year, don't we? It's going to be the summer of lager this year, but any hot summer and everybody's already reaching for the lager, but it's great to hear you've got so much going on. Thank you so much for joining us for this roundtable discussion. I hope our listeners have enjoyed it. Let us know, use the hashtag Hopinions, and just to say thank you all one last time for joining us this evening, and just to say cheers to you all, and long may your successes continue.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Cheers.
It's been loads of fun.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers. Been great fun.
Cheers.
Cheers.